Hi everybody, I'm Thomas from Virginia Outdoors Unlimited, and today I'm going to be sharing with you 8 tips that I have for those who are looking to get into kayak duck hunting or still learning the ropes of it. I personally have been kayak duck hunting for 3 years now, and during that time it has become my absolute favorite style of duck hunting, as well as probably my most effective. That said, I was inspired to record this video because I struggled a lot when getting into kayak duck hunting, and I'm hoping the tips I have will make it easier for those looking to figure out this style of hunting themselves. Lastly, before we get into the tips, if you want to see some of my kayak duck hunts from past seasons, I'll include a playlist up in the corner of the screen, but without further ado, let's get into the first tip I have. My first tip is to have as much waterproof gear as possible. The first thing I ever noticed when I started kayak duck hunting was that after nearly every hunt, everything in my kayak was wet to some degree. This is partially due to water flying up when you're paddling, and partially due to bringing water into the kayak whenever you get in and out, and of course rain and snow will have the same effect. Whatever the cause though, having wet gear is not enjoyable, and items that are drenched may not work or be ready for the next day's hunt. This includes clothing, gun cases, and blind bags, and anything else you may bring with you on kayak duck hunts that will be exposed to the elements. One piece of gear I'd highly recommend getting is a waterproof floating gun case to keep your gun in during your paddle in and out of your spot. I spent my first season hunting out of my kayak without one, and it led to me dropping my gun over the side of the kayak mid-season and losing almost a week of hunting because of it. A waterproof bag or box is another item I'd recommend you keep in your kayak at all times. I always keep an extra set of dry clothes in a bag and keep my phone, wallet, and keys in a small waterproof box so that in the case of a flip, I at least have what I need to stay alive and make it home safely. My main point here is really just the more waterproof gear you have, the better though, and at the very least have the ability to keep the items dry that you will need in an emergency. My second tip is to practice your swing and know your limits. Shooting from a kayak can be quite difficult and often comes with a learning curve, but there are things you can do to improve your ability during downtimes or in the off season. The first thing I would recommend is to get on the water in your kayak during some warm weather and practice shooting your shotgun while sitting in the kayak. Practice shooting as far left and as far right as you feel comfortable, and make a note of where those points are on your kayak. This will allow you to know the limits of your swing while you're out hunting, and hopefully reduce the risk of you flipping your kayak by shooting off balance, which is the main cause of the flips that I've witnessed. Another exercise I'd recommend if you plan on hunting out of your kayak in a layout style is to practice sitting in your kayak and shouldering your gun while trying to point at it at a particular spot, and then repeat this drill over and over until it becomes muscle memory. This repetition allows you to have better control of your gun and kayak while also identifying anything in your kayak that could catch or hang on your gun during a hunting situation. My third tip is to keep your kayak setup simplistic. For me, one of the main joys of kayak duck hunting is the simplicity of the vessel and style of hunting in general. However, what I see a lot of time on social media is guys who are loading their kayaks down with accessories and gear that simply is not needed, and I believe reduces the effectiveness of the craft. The thing I love about a kayak itself is that where you can go is solely based on how far you're willing to paddle, and that reliability is compromised when you introduce accessories and components you have to rely on. Many of the accessories I see being added are also add a lot of weight to the kayak, which I can say from experience often doesn't seem too bad in the off season, but can make the difference during the season between having a vessel that is manageable for long paddles and portages and one that is a pain. There are things like a gun mount that make a lot of sense to mount on your kayak, and I'm not here to bash those who want to work on their kayaks or accessorize them, but I really do think you'll be more effective if you keep to the basics, which is a boat that gets you and your gear from A to B, is comfortable to sit in and shoot out of, and conceals you well. My fourth tip is to make use of your mobility. One of the undisputed strengths of a kayak is the ability to move without a lot of effort or creating too much disturbance around you. I personally used to hate having to make a move during a hunt before I started using the kayak, but since I started hunting out of one, I found great success in moving to the birds on hunts where there wasn't much going on or we had missed the X. This is because the kayak makes moves of this nature much easier, since I can load my gear and be ready to move much quicker than when I used to walk and hunt. I can also pretty much go anywhere the birds are, since shallow water and obstructions aren't a real issue with the kayak as well. Making a move won't always be successful, but I would recommend at least giving it a try and seeing if being mobile in your kayak doesn't improve your success if you're struggling to get on the birds during a hunt. My fifth tip is to limit your hunting parties. I love getting out on kayak duck hunts with buddies, however I would recommend keeping the hunting parties small if you'll be hunting out of your kayaks. The first reason for this is purely due to concealment. Since when you're using a kayak in a layout style, your hide is often the biggest factor for your success, and it's just a fact that the more kayaks you're trying to hide, the harder it will be to conceal. It's pretty straightforward why more guys makes it tougher, since a bird only needs to see one thing it doesn't like to flare, and if you have 4 guys out versus 2, it effectively doubles your chances of something being seen. The other main reason for a smaller party size in these situations is communication, which invariably gets tougher as you add more people to your party and thus have to be spread out more over a wider area to hide. I personally enjoy hunting with 2 to 3 guys out of a kayak the most, but I will also say that I notice a lot less birds flaring off when it's just me trying to hide versus 2 other guys as well. My 6th tip is to use high water to your advantage. Many of the spots I love to kayak duck hunt can see fluctuating water levels during the season, and while many waterfowlers aren't a fan of high water due to it allowing birds to spread out, I typically have my best hunts out of the kayak while the water is up. This is because while birds do spread out somewhat while the water rises, we often see congregations of birds in flooded areas where new food sources are now available to those ducks or geese. Often these food sources may only be under 6 to 12 inches of water, which is perfect since the birds can easily feed in those shallows, and a lot of times these spots can only be accessed by someone with a kayak. High water is also a huge friend of mine when trying to hide around open sloughs or holes, since if the water is low there's typically a lot less natural cover to use and it's tougher to find top cover. You do have to be cognizant of your state's laws when hunting high water out of a kayak or any vessel, and these laws vary from state to state, but as long as you can paddle around and hunt legally, you should be able to find some success with your kayak while the water is up. My 7th tip is to attach your gun and paddle with leashes. One of the things every kayak duck hunter is worried about at some point is dropping their gun overboard or losing their paddle. As I said earlier, I personally have dropped my gun overboard in the pre-dawn hours once, which is the reason I now carry it in a case while paddling, but I've had multiple other close calls as well with it and other pieces of gear. A paddle leash, which is basically just a long bungee cord, is a great tool to secure any essential gear to your vessel and prevent the permanent loss of expensive gear if you were to flip. I'd recommend getting one to keep attached to your paddle and another one for your gun, and while I don't keep one connected to my blind bag, I would consider that as well if you carry valuables in there. A good place to attach a leash to your gun is the rear swing swivel if you have one, or the base of your stock. My 8th tip is to use a sled to carry your gear when needed. One of the main issues that plagues kayak duck hunters is that we often just don't have enough space in our boats to haul all the gear we'd like to. Decoys often present the biggest challenge, and while it may seem intuitive to just drag them behind your kayak if you use Texas rigs, this creates a lot of drag and makes paddling very difficult. A large hunting sled such as a jet sled or beaver tail sled is a great way to drag decoys or any other gear you need behind you while adding minimal drag. I personally can put 2.5 dozen duck decoys in the standard size jet sled that I have, and I've seen my buddy Elliot from Freelance Duck Hunting use a similar sled to drag his HTR A-frame behind his kayak. So if you need extra room for gear storage, that'd be my go-to. I hope y'all are going to be able to get some use out of those kayak duck hunting tips. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I hope it'll help at least a few people with getting into this style of hunting. If you have any questions about kayak duck hunting, about anything I talked about in today's video, leave them in the comment section down below and I'll make sure to get back to you. If you're still watching and you're not subscribed to the channel, I'd really appreciate you clicking that subscribe button and the notification bell, and it'll make sure that you don't miss out on any of my future videos, whether that be hunting, fishing, waterfowl related, whatever. I hope y'all are out there staying safe, and thanks for watching.